So hi Tom, can you?
I do. You decided not to
Good.
go out there.
Well, I was planning on going, and I'm still planning
Yeah.
on going, but I had to by home and got caught up, and suddenly it was 6 o'clock. So I'm here, and I'll be here, and I might try and run over there if I can find the best break.
It was getting, yeah, snow's getting pretty deep. Hi there.
Can you hear us in the room?
Yes, we do.
Great.
Yeah. Can I grab the last of a sandwich? But I'm here.
No. I don't have Andrew. Yeah, no, we do not.
Should we tell people?
Oh, I'm just sending memes.
Sorry. Should we tell people that we're waiting?
Andrew and Tom, we're waiting for quorum.
Okay, sounds like last night.
Bear with us.
Okay.
We just need one more. Actually. Is your quorum?
Just trying to get there.
Never mind, we need two more. We're short two.
Wow.
Who do we?
In the room is Steve Roundtree and Scott Papich, as well as the DCI team, Miranda and Kate.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for
Oh, I guess I
making
could
it
turn
in
on.
person. I turn on the.
We're full setup. We're board of trustees set up.
Okay, well, text me if you got. I mean, you need to call roll. I'm gonna just grab that food that I was threatening to bring down.
Right.
Hey, Tom. Oh, he's gone. Oh, Catherine's online. So Andrew and Catherine, I think we don't technically have quorum, but this is a work session and not a regular meeting. So I think we're gonna get started. Who am I? I'm just trying to figure out if I'm still. Oh. Whoever the call-in user is. Whoever the call-in user is, I'm sorry, I had to mute you. You'll have to press *7 to unmute. So maybe just for public record, while this is the regular DDA meeting night, this is a work session. For the record of who is in attendance, we have online Andrew Dewart, Catherine Vallon, call-in user, maybe we'll find out who that is, and in the room, Steve Roundtree and Scott Papich from the DDA board. And who is the call-in user? Is that you, Tom, maybe? On your way to us? You'll have to press *7, who was ever on the phone. Catherine, it's you. Great. Sorry, I muted you. You'll have to press *7.
Are you talking?
As much conversation as we can. Okay.
You're good. You're on.
Hello, everyone. My name's Catherine Karum with Downtown Colorado, Inc. And I have with me tonight Kylie Brown, who is also with Downtown Colorado, Inc., and Kimberly McKee, who is from the Longmont Downtown Development Authority. And we are going to work through some discussion with the Nederland Downtown Development Authority. Just a little background on who we are and kind of how we ended up being here. Our organization, Downtown Colorado Inc., was started as Colorado Community Revitalization Association in 1982 as an organization to educate, inform, share best practices, and help communities understand why they might want tools such as business improvement districts, downtown development authorities, and urban renewal authorities. And so we are the state association of those entities. We help communities that are considering those tools, as well as communities that have those tools, to understand how to use them. And so we have a lot of different educational content to support these entities. We also have we do a lot of facilitated conversations and kind of help work through where organizations are and how to move forward. And this is just an outline of our toolbox. So business improvement districts, downtown development authorities, urban renewal authorities are all what we refer to as place-based organizations. So they have a set geographic boundary and they work to reinvest money into that area. So really focusing on a specific space and how to make it more vibrant, more dynamic, pick your flavor type of services. And so one thing about these tools is while there are certain structures that are the same, each one and each community and the way they're used, I think, is very much individual. And so it's not a one size fits all, but they are tools and they are being used for innovation, creative solutions, and problem solving in a lot of different ways in different communities. And so, as I mentioned, it is all about place. And so this is kind of our mantra that we go by, which is that people are longing not just for a place to live, but a place to love. And so thinking about how you use these tools to really help implement the vision of the community and kind of give it that extra strength that you might need. Oftentimes we look at how these can fill a gap or make something happen that would not happen otherwise. And so that allows you to do better work than what you might do without these tools. So our process with the Nederland Downtown Development Authority is threefold. Tonight is meeting one, which is working with the Downtown Development Board, Authority Board, to really work through what are their priorities, what are their processes, what are the partnerships that they have, understanding where they want to go. Our meeting number 2 will be touring projects, looking at sites in the community, talking with businesses and property owners. And meeting 3 will be a combined meeting of the Downtown Development Board with the town board. And so that the goals for this, we will be putting together a report with recommendations. So at each phase of each meeting involved in that three-part series, we will be talking through next steps and actions, and we will have some recommendations that are accompanied by benchmarks to kind of gauge success, understanding the timeline and sort of looking through those recommendations and kind of how and when they would come to be, and the partnerships and the processes that are out there. So understanding the stakeholders, what has to happen for the vision to come to fruition. So that is what will come out of the process. And then our agenda for tonight will be looking at having some introductions, kind of understanding the people who are here and online, having some examples from another downtown development authority of projects and how they work. And I like to have these examples, and I like to put that out there at the beginning of the meeting so that we have something else to point to. Sometimes it's important to kind of think about how things are working in other places so that it's not as personal, and you can kind of have a discussion and really think through how that works. And so bringing in peer communities is something that we often like to do as we're working, because I think it really helps to put things in perspective a little bit. Then, we'll talk about what your current priorities are, driving your vision with tax increment financing, thinking about partnerships, the role of the board, how decision-making works, and ideas for the next time. And given that we have a little bit lower attendance, we will go through all of this. We have activities and times for talking. We did want to make sure to keep it balanced, and I did have several interviews prior to where they said, a lot of times it's a lot of discussion. And so we want to make sure that we kind of get through all of the areas. So we'll keep it moving as we go. Before we start off, we'll share some ground rules. And our, next slide, please. Our goals for today are talking through the basic understanding of downtown development authorities and TIF. There were some comments in the survey responses that people completed beforehand that may be some clarity around why and how to use these tools would be helpful. Understanding the role of the board, exploring ideas around partnerships, and considering how decisions are made. And then, as always, we like to have fun because what is downtown if not fun? So we will incorporate that with this rubber chicken. Okay. So we wanted to start off with introductions. And so for our introductions, we're hoping that every person can share their name, their day job. So what is it that you do? And then what is your desired outcome of this process? And we have some ground rules over here, which I understand that you guys often use, but following the code of ethics that's outlined for in the Board of Trustee agreement there, as well as when we're going around in a round robin, we keep it to 1 minute per response. And then when you're responding to a question, we keep it to 3 minutes per response. And are there any other ground rules that we think we might need to have? Okay. Great. So should we start? And we have some people who aren't on the board. We'd love to have participation as well from all people. And there will be one point where we'll just want to differentiate priorities and have anybody who's not on the board mark their post-it as non-board. But for the most part, we'd like for everybody to participate and we will have a great time. All right. Now, if you go over time, I'm squeezing this chicken. All right. So who would like to start? How about you, Scott? Would you like to start? Yes, please.
Okay, since you know my name, I'll go ahead and start. My name is Scott Papich. I live here in town. My day job, I have a small little business consulting company where I help organizations and brands look at market data and financial data and try to make better strategic decisions. Been on the board on the DDA board for about 1.5 years. And you wanted to know what are our goals, right?
What would you like to get out of it?
What I would like to get out of this process, what I'd like the DDA to get out of this process is a couple things. One, I would like for us to be more objective and a little bit more diligent and rigorous in the way that we evaluate the actions that we're trying to take in terms of plans and proposals. And even looking backward at the projects we do and we complete to see if they met our expectations when we agreed to undertake them. That would be my number one goal. And the other thing is the way that the way we communicate and run our meetings, I would love for us to be a little more crisp and concise as we move through issues. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Seems like we're going to go in a circle here. So my name's Steve Roundtree. I've been on the DDA board for, I think, 1.5 years. I think we came on the board at the same time. My day job, I'm the Director of Business Operations at Eldora. And as far as what I would like to kind of come out of this process with, I think we have an opportunity as a board to be more strategic with how we make decisions. And I think that will help us be more productive. It feels like we get bogged down in things, and there's a lot of time and effort that goes into conversation and decision making, but it doesn't feel like we drive results as quickly as we could. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to accomplish a lot more stuff. So that's what I hope that we come out of this with.
And I'm Kate. I'm Kate Massagale. I'm the executive director of the NDDA, and that is my day job. And my goals for this is really to see what more is possible. And I think some reframing. I think that those are some great opportunities that we have through this conversation to learn from other possibilities and how that we can make that work here in Nederland and leverage our funds and get things done in our community.
Sure. Tom Mahold, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm not a member of this board, so I'm probably the only one that's going to have to put that on my sticky. Day job, I'm an energy consultant. I work with between capital and energy projects and do advisory there. And the outcome I'd like is to have a downtown as great as our surroundings.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aiden Nykoff with SE Group. As Miranda mentioned, we are starting to kick off the comprehensive plan work in the next few weeks and months here. So I am coming to represent that side, but also just hear the group and listen. I realized my day job is not that clear, but community and recreation planner with SE Group. Desired outcome, I'm really excited to make sure that all of this great thinking and work is really illustrated in the comprehensive plan and that this work can get communicated to the sub-area detailed planning that we have for this as well. So thank you all.
Miranda Fisher, Town Administrator for the Town of Nederland. That's my day and nighttime job, my 24/7 job. I think what I'm hoping for is just a little bit more strategic thinking and planning. We saw that go really well with the Board of Trustees to help really give them a path forward. There's a ton of amazing things going on, and so only so much capacity. And so really helping to narrow in what are the priorities, what's the focus. I think that's what I'm hoping for. Andrew, do you want to go next online?
Sure. I'm Andrew Dewart, Vice Chair of the DDA. Day job is I'm a partner, half owner of we're a licensed general contracting company doing commercial and residential construction in the Front Range. So I was kind of like thinking about desired outcome through the lens of, is this desired outcome just what my desired outcome is for the DDA's engagement with DCI, or is it the desired outcome of, the DDA? So I guess I'm kind of going to speak through, if DCI is helping augment the DDA, that paradigm that, there's been a lot of talk lately and, heard some last night that was through the lens of organizational management consultants. And I think everything comes down to what I've heard is like implementation, and regardless of which model we're talking about, and not that that's what DCI is trying to do by any means. I guess my desired outcome would be that there's, I believe, a fair amount of good feasible projects the DDA should be going after, but the nature of the board and the volunteer nature of the board means that it's not necessarily realistic to think that we can work through or figure out all of the details. And so I think from a facilitation standpoint, I heard you mention facilitation and kind of goal, keep on track. And I think that is my desired outcome of the engaging of DCI, is that they can take the DCI's big picture goals and be a catalyst for implementation. So thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Catherine, star 6. Ready? Was it not working? Tanya, do you want to go next? They're doing name, day job, and desired outcome.
Desired outcome in what sense? For this meeting or for what?
For this, yeah, process tonight.
Well, I guess I'm still uncertain as to what the goal of this process is tonight. So that I don't have a desired outcome because I'm not really sure what this meeting's about. My name is Tanya. My day job is a potter.
Catherine, are you able to unmute? Or if not, do you want to throw it into the chat? I just tried to send you a request to unmute. Or Catherine, you can always text either me or Kate. If that's easier too. I don't know if you want to keep going while Catherine.
Yeah.
Sure.
We can keep going. And I'll just reiterate the goals that we just touched on. So we're looking to ensure a basic understanding of DDA's TIF, understanding the role of the board, exploring ideas around partnerships, and then considering how decisions are made by the DDA, and then having fun with that chicken. And getting ready for this, we sent out a survey to the different DDA members as well as other folks in the DDA area. The responses that we have are from DDA members. So we will continue sending out the survey to others to get responses as we go through the process. But these responses are from the board. And so we wanted to start off just by kind of running through what you all shared as lessons learned. And I think it was a pretty, for the most part, I think it was pretty positive. We can do this. We need to commit and follow through, move forward and don't get bogged down on projects, achieve more action and less discussion, follow a strategic plan. And so a lot of those messages are very complimentary, and it seems like people are kind of on the same page that you want to get a plan in place and move forward with it. I think that is very admirable and provides some good insight for us. Burnout and turnover is high in volunteer positions. So for large projects, it's important to hire the heavy lifting in order to accomplish goals. So I think that means like outsource when necessary, really using partnerships or contracts as needed. NEDPEDS taught us the need for better research and public involvement. The town is critical and not always constructive, and many board members are not always in touch with what town residents want, and at times make locals feel run over. So we wanted to share those and just ask if you can share a little bit. How do you feel about those? Are those pretty accurate to what you see as a board? And what are your thoughts there? Anyone can respond.
I'll kind of follow that up if you can leave that slide up. I think, in general, that is, I believe a good, synopsis of what everyone is feeling. I think as far as move forward and don't get stuck for years on projects. I mean, certainly there's regulatory, a lot of what this all comes back to is like the strategic plan. And while we do have a strategic plan, there's parts of it that need refining and cleaning up and examining. And so I think there's a balance of, making sure that we're moving forward under the right pretenses and not just being cavalier. And certainly, being a private business owner and not necessarily, and at times being frustrated at, the ability, for example, it's difficult to have, we can't, because of, sunshine laws, can't have necessarily all the meetings that I think we should be able to, not trying to hide anything, just that there's a communication bottleneck there just by the nature of public process. And then a lot of the projects that we do often involve either infrastructure or other things that involve the town and other agencies that need review. So just trying to be realistic about, why it takes some time to move forward with anything. And then, certainly burnout and turnover is and can be high. And I think that's where, looking back to DCI of like being a facilitator to help, can DCI help be a partner and, carrying through that framework in a non-biased way through changes in the board. That's just my thoughts on that. NetEds, that was a debacle, but yes, better research. And again, not being cavalier and just saying, well, somebody thought this would be a good idea and let's do it. Rub salt in that wound, but anyways, and sure, town is town can be and oftentimes is critical of anything that is, not like it was yesterday. And, however, inherently being the Nederland Downtown Development Authority, just like what is in our name isn't, the Nederland Downtown Preservation Society. So, how do we strike the balance of, smart and sustainable development that's aligned with the strategic plan of the town, and do it in a way that moves forward, doesn't get bogged down, and follows the plan. It's not necessarily an easy lift, but I think, we've got a good team, and that's my 2 cents on what you asked. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to ask a little follow-up question. This last bullet point, board members are not always in touch with what the town residents want. Is that referring to DDA board members or DDA and BOT and on all board members, including the advisory boards in town? Do we know?
I was assuming that was DDA board, but it's a good question.
Okay, I'm kind of curious about that. And I would say that doesn't surprise me. If it is a DDA, not because of the way DDA runs, but because we don't really get that much interaction with town residents that don't show up at our meetings, and they don't call into our meetings that often. They do show up for BOT more often than they do DDA. It seems like that point and the point before it, that the town is critical and not always constructive. Those are two, it sounds like two kind of conflicting comments. And I'm not sure where the truth lands, somewhere in between, usually, right? The one thing I will remark on is that the third bullet point says, achieve more action and less discussing and consultation. We're a volunteer board. We meet once a month. It is hard to make meaningful progress quickly on these issues. We have processes, to Andrew's point, that are they're burdensome, but we do still try to make progress. It does take time, but in my opinion, I do want to see us make more progress and take more action, but less discussing. I don't know if that's if that's something that I would completely agree with. I think we need to have less meaningless discussion and more concise discussion around the facts and around real data points and around useful information.
Great. All right. Well, as we were reviewing this, we thought there's one thing everybody agrees on, which is that you will never agree 100% on anything. And that's to be expected because that is just the way of the world. So we just wanted to highlight these at the beginning. And now we're going to jump into examples from another downtown development authority. We have Kimberly McKee from Longmont Downtown Development Authority, and she's actually been here and spoken with the Nederland Downtown Development Authority several times over the years. So she's excited to be back, and we have some examples of how they work that we can kind of use in reference throughout the rest of our meeting. Kimberly?
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Always happy to help a neighbor, a fellow DDA. So when Kat asked me, she just asked me to talk through 3 different projects that we've used TIF on and how we got there. So Roosevelt Park Apartments is a mixed-use development. It's 114 residential units. It has several retail spaces at the bottom, and it has our first ever parking structure. So this was the first project that I worked on when I moved into town. I came here in 2011, but the project started well before me. So next slide, you can kind of see, I just wanted to show what the area looked like before. It was a gas station that had been closed for some time, a church that was no longer operating as a church. I believe it became some kind of biker bar and then something else. And so it was, it had lost the love of that property. It was pretty dilapidated and some other things. Next slide. And then you can see the property owner over 10 years assembled several properties in the area, and they're kind of shown in that little red dashed line. Years prior to, or while they were acquiring this site, they did also build this, which is probably as close to Class A office space as you would get in Longmont. They built that office building. When I came into town in 2011, that office building was about 60% vacant. There wasn't a lot going on in the area. So that's kind of what it looked like. Next slide. So this kind of goes through the time frame, and I always do want to just kind of say, I call our jobs like running through peanut butter, right? Like everyone wants things to go fast, and sometimes it's just humanly impossible to get them to go as fast as you want. So this is a quick time frame, and I'm sorry, I forgot my glasses, so I have to pull this up on my computer so I can actually see it. There we go. So they had built that office building back in 2003. They started purchasing their acquisitions in 2003. There was a recession in there. And even when I came in 2011, the whole downtown area was still pretty much reeling from the recession. There was well over 20% vacancy in our downtown. And we're an older DDA. I probably should have started with there. Our DDA is one of the 3 oldest in the entire state of Colorado. So we've been around since 1982 as well. One of the things in our master plan and one of the things that our board really wanted as a priority and the community wanted was a parking structure and mixed use development. And so when we looked at this project, we had about 29 overarching goals in our master plan, and this one hit 15 of them. So it was well over 50% of the things that we built in through consensus and talking about the community needs that this project ended up with. So we started talking about the project in 2011. We executed our redevelopment agreement in 2012. And this project opened in 2014, and it has been 100% occupied as far as residential and pretty much retail since we opened it. So it has it really did hit the marks that we needed as a community to hit. We had to put together a kind of our first large incentive package for this, which was a mixed-use development. And so looking at how we were going to use the TIF and how we were going to use the tools within our toolbox to make this work. When we looked at how come we have to invest in this project, we looked at it as a catalyst project. And what was interesting is it was a catalyst project, obviously hit 15 of those goals. When we started it, there was no market rate housing in downtown. All of the housing that we had in downtown was affordable housing. And it was either affordable housing by design because we had made strategic investments in it, or it was affordable housing because it was so dilapidated that it was at such a low price point because people weren't really living there. So we didn't have market rate. We certainly had no nicer apartments. So we didn't know if the market would bear that, right? There was no really point to reference to say, do people even want to live down here? We started building the project, and I'll talk about the incentives in a minute, but we started building the project. The building across the street went from 60% vacant to 100% full while we were building this project. We talked about things, and one of the incentives, one of the things that we put as a DDA as a criteria of these incentives, oftentimes when you have a mixed use like this, people will live there, but the retail is really slow to fill up. And then the community comes and says, this sucks. This is not what we wanted. Nobody see this. Nobody likes it, even though 114 new households are now in your downtown. We understand that a new build construction is different than what the current market rates would be. And so what we basically wrote in there was, for the first 3 years, you're going to have to hold these to market rate for the rest of downtown to give these new businesses the ability to come in, get established, and then do a good build out and stay. That ended up being one of the best things we could have done. That's really what got that retail off the ground and made that a more community performing. And then when we looked at the parking structure, the parking was primarily for the residents, right? However, we made a floor and a half of that parking structure public parking. And so again, we added to the public parking. We were able to sell permits on that. So those were kind of the things that we really looked through that says, what is in our master plan? Our community wanted more restaurants. They wanted more places to gather. They wanted a parking structure. So how do we take what's going to be happening if we're going to contribute in this project and get some of those other community things? I'll talk a little bit about our creative district, but one of the things, we were just founding our new creative district and we needed some more art spaces. So part of the deal was the DDA, there was some retail space, little retail space in the parking structure, like on the street side. And so we invested and said to them, you know, we'll lease these for 3 years and we'll give them to artists to start activating those spaces, because we also knew that that was a priority of ours as well. So sometimes looking at what's happening and trying to figure out what are our end goals and how do we in this project make sure some of our other goals can be met was something that we really looked at. So we looked at things, we had a TIF program. So we said, you could build a facade based on what's on code, but we want a facade that's nicer. We want one that fits with the historic character of our district. And so using brick and using other materials was one of the criteria that we were able to do. So we gave an incentive on the facade materials. We gave money up front, a chunk of money. We don't do this anymore, but we gave a chunk of money up front so they could build the parking structure. And then over time, they're giving us money back each month, you know, so it was really to get that project built, to fill that gap, but they kind of lease it and give us some money back year over year. Again, we had that commercial lease, and the city of Longmont also participated in doing some of the street improvements, doing some of the undergrounding. So it really was a kind of a three-way partnership with the DDA, the city, and the developer. So this is just a couple, next slide, it's just a couple pictures of what it looks like today. It's kind of thriving on the street. That's kind of the interior. That other picture, it cut off. I'll see there's a lady sitting there working by the pool. And then you can look, the next slide, just another slide quickly. So when we talk about a catalyst project, after we made this deal, everyone would come and say, I have a catalyst project, and it was completely not a catalyst project, right? It was maybe nice, but not a catalyst project. So we really had to start to define, they're proving a market. This is something brand new in the market. They're filling all of these goals. And look what it did. Not only did that office building go to 100%, it also, we went from 19% vacancy over the years to about 5% vacancy. And so this is at the very north end of our district, and it was a part where there's not been a lot of investment. Our historic core was a couple blocks down, so people often didn't even think of this as part of the DDA. So it really made a huge difference in kind of getting an anchor there. When we put this deal together, one of our board members was on this development team. And so what we had to do, he wasn't involved in the project at all. So even when we talked and negotiated with the folks that were doing the project, he was never in the room. And then when we voted on it, he would recuse himself before the discussion started, and then he would come back when it was over. So that was the way our board kind of dealt with that. Just to kind of make sure that it was transparent, and he was not a part of that deal on either end of it. But then he participated in the other board activities as they moved on. So that was a mixed-use development that we did with the community and a public-private partnership. The next one I want to talk about is our alley, breezeway, and parking lot project. And this was a infrastructure municipal partnership with the city, the DDA, and our Longmont Power and Communications. We really looked at our alleys and breezeways. The drainage was horrible. There was utility lines everywhere, trash cans everywhere. And if you've ever been to Longmont, our parking lots are all in the back. So our front door was basically our back door, and it was not a welcoming door. And so we really knew we wanted it to be fixed up. So the city would have probably fixed it up to the baseline of which they fix up other things. But the DDA and the community vision were that these could be much more. And so how do we take that baseline of what the city's going to do and we add amenities and kind of make it for what we want it to be in the future? So the next slide would show a little bit of the before and after. So if you look down, those poor folks trying to navigate our old alleys, that's kind of what they looked like, not super welcoming. And if you look up above, that's what they look like today. And then we had these breezeways that connected Main Street to these alleys, and that enclosed scary tunnel. Like, the foundation of everything we do at the DDA is kind of, it has to be clean and safe, right? Like, our baseline is if it's not clean, it's not safe, doesn't matter how great it is, no one will come back. So that was not yelling clean or safe to us. And so we were able to really open those up, make them public gathering places. I think what we really had to do to work together on this is say, what can the city do? What will they do within their thing? And then how does the DDA partner with that? Add these amenities, things like they could have just done no screen walls at all in the alley, but we knew that we wanted screen walls for safety and we wanted some other things. So how do we kind of make that work and do a joint investment? Or the trash enclosures, which are on public property, we built those, we manage those to make sure that there's not trash can everywhere. We worked with our public power, and they said, we'll underground these utilities, but we're not going to pay from that connection from the building in. So the DDA said, that's important to us, so we'll pay for that. And so we really looked at what's important to us and how could we pay, because the project wouldn't have happened otherwise. We were in constant communication with our stakeholders during this entire construction's hard, right? And so the DDA took the lead role along with the city project manager to really talk about, here's the update, here's what's going to be happening. The other thing we decided is if we're going to put millions of dollars in our alleys, but the back of the buildings still look very unwelcoming and you don't want to go into them, maybe that's not going to be the best use of our investment. So we started a facade grant that really worked for the back of those buildings. Again, this was at the time where Longmont was still kind of hit hard by the recession in 2012, but we had over half of the property owners that took us up on that grant. And some was as simple as just painting the back of their buildings. Others were complete rehabs of their back entrances. So we really said, how can we also make this work for our stakeholders and set up another project that got them to invest in their buildings? So next slide. And last one is kind of what I say a little bit more of those softer services. So we were commissioning an arts and entertainment district plan along with the community and lots of folks to say, folks really wanted our downtown to be kind of where they go for arts and entertainment. So we really talked to the community, talked to a ton of stakeholders and found out what they wanted their downtown to be. We started implementing that plan. We became one of the certified Colorado creative districts through the state. We were really looking to encourage businesses in the creative industries. We develop a lot of placemaking initiatives through that. So through that project that we work on, we do things like wayfinding, we facilitate events. We're trying to get out of the event planning business and be more into the event facilitating business. So as people want to do other events, how do we make sure that they can do that downtown, have the tools that they need? We did, through our creative district, understand that people wanted to preserve the historic parts of our downtown. So we got a national historic district to give tools in the toolkit for folks that want to preserve their properties. Next slide. Whoops, I went way too far. Oh, yeah. So there you can kind of see some of the things that we've worked on. And a lot of these were collaborations of art on the move that we do with art in public places. We had a private foundation that wanted to do a mural project, so we worked with that. So a number of tools that we do to kind of meet those goals that we have through our community. Everything that we do, it comes out of this master plan. We updated it. I will tell you, I, as a director, probably look at it every single day. It's probably pretty close to memorized, but it's always our touchstone to make sure. It was a community-led plan and the community helped us put it together. And this plan will endure time. We did a 5-year strategic plan as soon as we adopted it off of this plan. What are we going to do for the next 5 years? And then each year we do an annual working plan and say, these are the goals. So right now, I didn't talk anything about it, but we focus a heck of a lot on pedestrian safety and connectivity and things like that. Sometimes our role is just to advocate. Sometimes I feel like a bird that's flying into a window trying to get in. 12 years later, we just got flashing lights so you can cross Main Street safely at our mid-blocks. So I'm pretty proud of that. But that's just a couple of the tools and the ways that we use our TIFs.
Great. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts for Kimberly?
Yeah, Kimberly, this is going back several years. I went on a police ride-along program 20 years ago, and we chased all the criminals into those alleys. They were as full of them, and it was decrepit back there. The way it flows now is just wonderful. I love how you brought parking. You made parking so simple compared to street parking, and the facade stuff turned out beautifully. And Longmont's a great place to go now for music, for arts, for events, and it's turned out to be a good walking city too. It took a lot of work, but it sure turned out nice.
Great. And so now we do understand that Longmont and Nederland have a lot of differences, but the way that you can use the DDA, as I said, the tools themselves kind of have the structures that guide them. Each community is very unique. So those case studies and different examples of how they're using their TIF in Longmont is just to sort of set the stage and to look through the lens of another community as we go forward. But in your survey responses, once again, I want to turn back and share what we heard in terms of the primary focus of the DDA in Nederland so far. Funding town infrastructure projects, beautification projects, mainly flowers, aiding businesses with grants and reimbursements for festivals and farmers market, wayfinding to create infrastructure amenities that increase dollars spent in downtown by attracting shoppers or making it easier for existing shoppers to access businesses, and supporting events that draw people or dollars to the downtown. Does that sound consistent? Are there any additions or other thoughts to add to what you have focused on? And I guess, oh,
Yeah, I'm not on this board, but I would ask you guys, is the performing arts space still a priority, or is that something you're working on?
Hey, Tom, I'm gonna respond to that. Just give me 45 seconds and I'll be right back.
Okay. Scott, you got 43 seconds.
I'll give you 30 seconds, okay? And that has been a priority, but there's been some studies that show that we've got some floodplain issues that we need to figure out before we can even figure out how to work with them. We have to figure if it's even feasible to try to build on that space. In that process, and Andrew and I have talked a lot about this project, and he's one of the people who's instrumental to that project. We've been questioning whether or not we know what to do with that kind of space. So what we've decided would be a smart thing to do for 2024 is take on an event schedule that we would facilitate, mainly around music. We're calling it the Summer Concert Series. It might spill out beyond summer, winter now, but something like that would actually give us more experience in what to do with a performance space before we actually build the performance space. There's Andrew Dewart right there. How are we doing, Andrew? 5, 4, 3, 2.
Sorry, wrong name tag, but yeah, the performance space, is that a priority? Is that something we're pursuing? So to follow up kind of with what Scott said, I think back, looking at the 2013 plan, comprehensive plan that was done, where I don't know if much thought or the question was asked, is this in a floodplain, and what are the limits and restrictions on construction given its location? Like, good drawings were done, and in my view, in a perfect world, we'd be able to ask DCI, say, hey, DCI, we need help to get rid of the propane tanks. We need to free up a lot more real estate down by the reservoir, clean it up, and then do a comprehensive plan that involves not just this trapezoid north of the treatment plant, but the propane tanks as well. And before, so right now, where I think Scott and myself and Tanya have come to, is that really the best thing that we can do is begin by having a summer concert series that, begins to introduce relationships and people and processes to say, okay, you spoke earlier about you don't necessarily want to be promoters or facilitate, like you'll facilitate events, but you don't want to put on events. That's the same. I think we're all in the same boat there. So like saying, okay, let's at least start with the summer concert series. I still think that the whole, lakeshore of, I'm still not sure of how the intergovernmental agreement with the city of Boulder and the town of Nederland affects the maintenance of the drainage culvert at this piece of land, which has been like, so here's the bottleneck, is like 10 years ago, a lot of people said, this is the spot where we're going to have a performance space. I don't know if that was really thought through fully at the time, but if it was, then we're still back at like, there's some things that need to be worked out related to how is that maintained, and with the city of Boulder. How can we also have a piece of land that slopes downhill, and in the floodplain, you can't really grade it up. You have to, if you raise it 4 feet here, you have to take it down 4 feet there. So again, I think that that's why my own personal opinion is that with the propane tanks, then that becomes a feasible area for like waterfront entertainment district. You know, but until then, it doesn't make any sense to put any money to that other than the kind of relationships around a concert series.
That's a great start. I think we'll learn a lot in the process. There's a couple of things that I've seen the sprigs up here that could be a basis for some of the things you built successfully. We've got one really nice art store downtown. She right out of the chute was very successful and is painting as fast as she can to keep up with it. There, I think it shows me there's a market for a lot more of that. Then on the quirky side, that the rock shop is another one of those things that you know, we've got a lot of classic gift type shops, but people come here and they want to buy something. And then the other thing, we've had a pretty good job with we've done a good job with events like Ned Gravel and such, where we'll bring 2,000-3,000 people to town for outdoor activity, and we don't have any place for them to eat lunch afterwards. There's just too few selections and they don't scale. So I think those are some of the sprigs that could be in effect, your alleys and the way you developed them.
All right. So, thinking now about the future, and your priority areas. So you have 4 priority areas and they are pretty, specific: beautification, circulation, events and programming, and business services. What we wanted to do is have each person write just one word. Write 3 priorities, but just one word for each of the 4 categories. So for the people here, you have Post-its, and if you can write one word on 12 Post-its, right? For the folks who are online, if you can write beautification and then write 3 words that outline your priorities under beautification, and then do the same with circulation, events and programming, and business services. What we'd like to do is then collect these, and we will combine them all. But just thinking about in your priority areas, what are your top 3 ideas?
What does circulation mean?
I would generally define circulation as a multimodal access getting into and around the downtown.
Okay, and then business services, what is that?
Things that support the businesses in the downtown because it's specific to the downtown.
And I think Tanya and Catherine, since you're online, the intention was that they would put it in the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I figured. All right.
Okay, so let's all take 5 minutes to do that.
We'll come up with that.
Yeah, try and summarize your 3 priorities under each category. So for example, beautification could be flowers, could be murals, could be facades.
Performance artwork pen.
Just less than a minute left. All right. Okay. So now we're going to share back. And what we have is for the folks in the room, if you can take them over there and we'll put them on these flip charts. I cannot get up and walk away from this microphone. So, so do you, yeah. Okay, do it. All right, and then for those on the, oh, Kimberly, can you write the ones that we're gonna take off of here? We'll read them to you. I put markers over there. All right, Catherine, Miranda, would you like to read the online responses? And Kimberly will write them.
Kimberly, where do you want to start? Beautification, bountiful, colorful, engaging. And then the other one is upgrading appearance cohesively. That was one submission. And then the next one is upgrading appearance cohesively. Cohesively. And then circulation. We have eliminate bottleneck. And then parking, traffic control, pedestrian. Yes. For events and programming, one of them is community, festive, positive. And then wholesome event for all ages. And then for business services, we have banking, communication, supplies. And then the other one is support infrastructure of full-time businesses. Right. And then I think what we're going to do for all the ones that are on our flip charts, Kylie's going to type them in and we will have a word cloud for each one. So we can share those back a little bit later.
to be sensitive to time. All right. Thank you for sharing those.
Uh-oh. Sorry. Okay. Bear with us. We're going through the journey.
Yeah, I think she'll put them all together and all right. So our next section is going to jump into board and governance. And this is really to talk a little bit about how DDAs are structured and then the typical role of the board. Then we'll get into really how you all operate. And thinking about how you drive your vision as a board. So with DDAs, the purpose in the statute is to deter blight. Funding is TIF. You can also have a mill levy. The guiding documents are the bylaws, the plan of development. If you have a strategic plan, and then your budget and kind of those things that you might put together. So as Kimberly said, they then take a 5-year strategic plan and do an annual work plan. You all have your strategies for this year as well. The DDA life is 30 years with an optional extension of 20-year segments. You were originally started in 2005. So yeah, just under 18 years. And so you have 12 years left. Did they need to extend from 25 years to 30 years? So you probably only have 25 years if you never changed it. Is that right? For debt authorization? Mm-hmm. So when you were started, the life was 25 years. So there is an option to make it 30. And then you can extend for 20. But you likely have 25 years to do what you're going to do. All right. And then the central business district is the primary focus for like where you base a DDA and things that are adjacent. All right. So in terms of a board, typically the board will determine the vision and mission, think about the values to be promoted. And so in this instance, I would think that yours are kind of the beautification, circulation, events, programming, business services. Thinking about the review, determining and reviewing policy or use of TIF. So what do you want to put your TIF towards, right? I think Kimberly talked about a couple different things that were relevant here. They looked at making things better, right? In adding higher quality materials to projects that were happening, right? Looking at making things faster and speeding up the timing of when things might happen, or things that would not happen if not for use of their investment. And so like undergrounding the wires wouldn't have happened if they hadn't made a contribution for that to actually happen. So those are kind of how they look at when TIF is possible. We'll talk a little bit more about TIF coming soon. But then thinking about your board as a decision-making body and keeping in mind that each individual opinion is a board member's right, certainly. But after a board makes a decision, that becomes what your decision is. And that is a unified point that everybody kind of gets behind. And so being a part of a board, generally you like to think that when a decision is made, everybody on the board is going to support that decision. Do you want to add anything, Kimberly?
Yeah, I would just say, again, our touchstone is our master plan, and certainly making sure that those are set and aligned, and making sure they also stay aligned with the community. So our community went through a big comprehensive plan update, and they did tons and tons of outreach. When that comprehensive plan was adopted, we updated our plan to align with the city's comp plan, because it is part of the city's comp plan, it's part of the overall vision. So after they updated that, we went back to the community and said, this is great. And now we're going to drill down a little bit further and make sure you know what you want for the downtown area. And so that was a really good way to kind of build off of the momentum of the community outreach that was happening. And again, with community involvement done in this plan, as we move forward and we kind of take the chunks of what it's going to be. And when I present the budget, again, it's super tied to this plan. So when I present the budget, it will talk about the goals that it corresponds with, that are put. And these goals are not super specific, right? Sometimes the goals are overarching, like, the business support goals or economic vitality goals. There's a number of them, and they're not uber specific because times change and people change and situations change. And so we're able to kind of evaluate each one based on what's happening at the time.
Great. And so we have some examples of some things that different TIF entities use, right? So if you're using TIF, if we're giving you TIF for your project, the things that you might want to encourage. So improved facades, historic preservation, different hiring practices, different wage practices, thinking about supporting small local businesses or contractors, job training, placemaking, project art. There's a number of different things that you can do. But we wanted to talk a little bit about what are your goals as a board? What are the things that you would like to encourage with your TIF? And have you explored those ideas before? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're looking for you to kick us off, Andrew.
I feel like you swallowed a canary. Well, she's like giggling. What do you want to support?
What do we want to support? Well, I think you'll get different answers from different members, of course, but I mean, I think ultimately, going back to what is one of the core tenets of the DDA, deter blight, right? And help improve and support businesses and use the taxes, the TIF funds from the businesses to help deter blight and bring it back into the community. And so, how are the different ways to do that? Some people have ideas that it should be more infrastructure, or let me just take ownership of how would I like to see things, TIF funds be spent. I mean, that's a pretty broad question that I think right now we've got an opportunity. We always have opportunities, but there's
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I would say if we ruled the world and everyone was on our side, what are 2 to 3 projects that you would do tomorrow? Right? Like, we want to get to know that, or no?
I'm less concerned about the actual projects than the criteria behind them, right? So Kimberly said things that we want to do better, right? Like we want to take existing projects and make them better, faster, or things that would not ever happen. So those are criteria that they're like, yes, this is something we want to invest in because it will be better, faster, or won't happen without it, right? So not necessarily saying, what are all of the projects that you would do? But are there things that you want to support?
Right.
Like improved facades? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, I could jump in on this. I think we had a good, one of the trustees from the Board of Trustees did a strategic planning session with the DDA board this summer. And that was a month to 2 months before we started working through our budget. And then we started working through the budget, and we had a lot of things in the budget that were great. And we had stuff that we had talked about in a strategic planning session that were things that kept coming up as important to the board that weren't included in the budget. And it was like going back to the strategic conversation and saying, well, if when we talk about things at a high level, this is important, then why isn't it represented in the budget? And trying to say like, those should be aligned, that we should keep track of what we think is important and fund it. And we also shouldn't fund things that we've said aren't important. I think at a high level, without getting into like going through all of those line items, like there's a little bit of that, like if everybody agrees that something's important, we should figure out ways to fund it.
Mhm.
And I heard you.
Examples of things that everybody said were important.
Go ahead, Steve.
I don't know if it was everybody. I think there were some common themes. I mean, I do, the beautification came up over and over. I think parking always comes up as some parking, and like, I guess that's why it became circulation, right? Some of it is a place for someone to park so they can actually stop in town, but it's reduction of gridlock at busy times. So the ability for people to like choose to flow through town or stop if they want to, but not be stopped on a road. I think those were kind of things that most people agreed on.
Okay.
Yeah, and I heard you mention criteria, and at our last meeting, we discussed trying to streamline a process, evaluation process for looking at, why are we doing something? Who's it for? How's it managed? How will we know? And Scott and I sat down and we kind of broke that up into the front end and the back end, and the back end being kind of the metrics of it after it happens. So, I mean, I think we're on the right track. I mean, I guess in a perfect world, what would we do tomorrow if we could, and I think, at least me personally, deal with the, propane tanks and look at a second bridge and circulation and beautification. I mean, in a macro level.
Great. Are there other things to Kimberly's question? Like if you had a magic wand, what would be different tomorrow?
This is Tanya. I mean, I would speak to the blight again, like the propane tanks. There's a few more examples in town of businesses in the DDA district that are not contributing a dime to our economy, and could be incredibly valuable. And there's nothing we can do about it. It seems like, based on our code. That's one thing. And then the second thing is to make it a more pedestrian friendly town. But that's going to take a lot. I mean, our sidewalks, or the few sidewalks we have, are covered in ice starting now until it melts, so it's just not going to be that town. And that's just something we have to come to grips with. It's only that kind of town for about 4 months out of the year. So how much do you want to invest in that to make a pedestrian friendly town for only 4 months out of the year? I mean, I think it's still worthwhile, but knowing that in the winter, people are going to have to drive to different destinations, even if it's from the BNF to First Street, you know, because they don't want to fall on their walk over. So the parking issue is really important.
Tanya, when you said that the businesses are not contributing, can you explain a little bit more on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, for instance, there's the lot next to the gas station that used to be a bakery that was determined to have some kind of toxic poisoning from the gas station. So I believe the gas station purchased it and it's been sitting empty ever since. There is a barbecue place, like a mobile business that hasn't operated much since COVID, but that was operating for a while. But that, to me, that seems like a really great location. It's the first thing you see when you come in town, and nothing. And on the other end of town, we have the Nieder House, which is owned by Eldora. I don't know if it's in the DDA district. It may not be, but again, it's not reaching its potential of how it could contribute to our town. These are both entrances to our community. It's the first thing people see, and they're not welcoming.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're gonna jump a little bit more into driving your vision with tax increment. I'm gonna let Kimberly kind of talk about how this works based on her project. But first, we have this definition. So when we think about tax increment finance, it's a financing mechanism that helps the community encourage private sector investment around the community vision, right? So oftentimes you are using this to leverage and encourage the private sector to solve for some of the things that you are hoping to do. So say in Kimberly's example where they were going to put up housing, but they wanted it to have a brick facade so it would be more cohesive with the rest of the district. So they add on and make that private sector investment more meaningful for the town. I'm assuming that you all do know how TIF is generated and how it works.
Wait, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. This is Tanya. Yeah. So this is that Roosevelt Apartments. And in order to make the building more attractive, the DDA pitched in to assist with the signing of the building to the private developer. Is that correct? Am I understanding right?
Yeah, so we invested in what we call our facade program, which was facade grade updates. So upgrading those materials, those type of things. When we did that and we had contributed those dollars, it came with a second lien on that property, basically saying that they had to keep it up, they had to keep it, you know, looking nice, the beautification, that type of thing. And if they did not meet the tax projections that they said that this project was going to bring into the DDA over time, we had the ability to claw back those funds from the developer to bring them back into the DDA.
But they would have to pay you back?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you for explaining that.
How long do you have liens on the properties?
So we project them out a certain amount of years. It could be 20 years, 25 years. Most of them will meet it much sooner than that, right? And so we just had our first facade ever that met it, and that lien will come off their property now. So we're going to do a release of that lien.
So the lien, does the number of years the lien is on the property correspond to how much investment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then we evaluate it every 2 years to say, okay, how much has been paid? How much has come to the DDA? And then we just kind of tick it down.
Okay.
Can I talk about one other project real quick, I think? So when we use our TIF and we decide how we're going to use our TIF, we look at, you know, we really needed a lot more restaurants and retail spaces. And we wanted non-retail spaces to not be in storefront. So we said, okay, we want to be able to have new businesses come in, not always have the burden of build out. So we created what we call a retail conversion grant. So if you take a storefront space that was not generating sales tax, and the DDA doesn't get sales tax, but it is important to the community. And obviously that means it's a retail business that is open to the community. So we propped up a grant that we would pay up to 25% of those costs, usually looking at interior improvements, looking at life safety code issues, as well as facade. And that's really helped us get different breweries, get different restaurants, and it does two things. Number one, it's an investment in the property. So that's anything we fund has to stay with the property. So we're investing in the property. They don't pay property tax, but it also eases the burden off of those businesses. So it's also, we don't invest in businesses, although we invest tons of ways as far as marketing and support and advocating and troubleshooting. But we don't say, here's a grant that you can pay your rent with. But by being able to offset that TI, it does help the business quite a bit get established.
What's the name of this grant? How do you guys call it?
It's called a retail conversion grant.
Oh, that could be useful perhaps for some of those places.
This is Ron. This is Ron. This retail conversion grant is something that is generated and paid by the DDA. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the DDA allocates a certain amount of TIF that we'll put. The cap is 15,000 per conversion, but we also then worked with our Longmont Economic Development Partnership, and they will match it at an additional 7,500. So it's a 2-to-1 match.
Who matches it?
Our Economic Development Authority, or
Oh,
our
okay.
Economic Development Partnership.
Gotcha. We don't have that. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so I'm assuming that you all have basic knowledge of how TIF works. This is actually set for 25 years. That is how long urban renewal authorities have to use TIF. And as I mentioned, DDAs can go 30 years. But the idea is typically that in that base year, but for the investment of TIF, a project might not happen. And so it all jumps off in that corner, the corner where the red meets the green. And from that point of investment, the increment, which is the space between the green and the red line, starts to accumulate due to the investment, right? So the private sector investment that is spurred by TIF. And so you can use the TIF over that time. So you're sort of investing in future funds that you haven't brought about yet. This is another chart that I actually prefer because it shows how the base is the darker purple going across, and then the increment is what's generated every year. And so you see in this instance, the base started at 4,837,000. The base at the end of the 25 years is at 6,001,138,000. And the increment is about 10 million on top of that. Well, close to 11 million on top of that. So you're reinvesting the money that will be coming about. I'm assuming that you all have an understanding of how that works, but the idea that but for this investment, the project wouldn't happen, it wouldn't be the same quality, it would take a lot longer. All of those things are kind of this idea of but for this investment. And so oftentimes when you're thinking about TIF, you think about it as a way to catalyze other projects, catalyze the types of investment you'd like to see. So when we think about the things that you're trying to encourage in your community, it's not that you, the DDA, has to go out and do all the things. It's that you have to catalyze them. You encourage other people to do them. So as you think about what your plan is, it's really thinking back to that process. Do you want to add anything, Kimberly? There?
I did, I got
Oh, the word cloud. Oh, okay. So our next thing that we wanted to talk tonight about is the partnerships to further the vision, right? Because as you're using the TIF to encourage types of investment, encourage types of projects, what's key is that there's partnerships, right? And so the partnerships are sometimes going to be with the town, sometimes with a private property owner, sometimes with the business. And that's how you leverage it, is through the partnership. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how partnerships work for you. And just diving in a little deeper to something that Kimberly said earlier, which is typically as you're looking at your projects, you want to think about, is this something the DDA would lead? Is it something the DDA would advocate for? Or is it something that you would be a partner on? Okay. And so we have your 2023 DDA strategies that came about from your planning meeting. And we thought we could just review these and say, okay, are you leading? Are you advocating? Or are you partnering on these activities? And I can read them, since you guys probably can't read this slide. All right. So we'll just go through and we can kind of yell out the answers. Finish phase 1 of wayfinding. Lead, advocate, partner. Lead. And so you own that and you're putting in signage.
Yes, but it's not entirely independent.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a discussion where some of the work is being done. Visioning that presents itself.
Mm-hmm.
Should be consistent with what presents itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not completely independent.
Just a reminder to talk in your mics or they can't
talk
hear you
in-
online.
Sorry. We are the lead, we are funding it, but that work will inform the wayfinding because obviously we're not going to go off in a totally different direction, but we are the lead on that project because we are funding it and they've been working on this for years.
Okay. And then finish work in progress, wrap up murals, detail the rest of the items that need finishing for Big Springs, and wrap up the pedestrian bridge.
So this one is lead, and this is really wrapping up our 2023 projects because this is really the 2023 DDA strategies. It is what we came up in 2023, but a lot of it is talking about for 2024.
Yes.
And so that is just talking about wrapping up our projects for this year that we've been working on.
Okay. Creating the summer concert series.
That's lead,
Lead.
but we will have partnership for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Replace. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I think we're looking to hire someone to run it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the idea, is that it's not gonna be volunteer run. It will be RFP for somebody to do all the, all the logistics that.
The professional
we
work.
can't take on. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we're not, and town's not gonna take that on either. I mean, I think the burden will go on a hired person with a volunteer oversee. The DDA oversee.
Okay. That's great. Replace crusher sidewalks with concrete sidewalks.
What was the last choice of the multiple three? I think, a partner would be my sense on that. Advocate or partner, I think, yeah, we just, we said we'd either want to allocate some money to help fix the immediate or put enough up for a grant if they could all be replaced. But so that's that. Yeah, partner.
All right, create a comprehensive plan for parking and traffic control.
Advocate.
Then the town would be the lead. Set aside time for NDDA to contribute to the comp plan and CBD sub-area plan.
Maybe advocate more contributing to. Meeting it, it's already existed. So those are plans that are already in existence. That would be, I think, probably an advocacy role.
Okay.
What do you think?
That's a way when you were talking about your budget, the town requested your input on
Right.
those items. And that's part of the reason that they're even, I think, part of this discussion, or we're on there was basically just acknowledging that the DDA's viewpoint was important in those documents.
Great. Collecting existing data and identifying gaps with businesses and residents for the Riverwalk.
This is you think
I mean, if there's progress made on that one, that would be a leadership role.
So lead and maybe doing it through a contract.
No, there's just a committee that started to do some due diligence and look at things. So yes, in the spirit of the way it's listed there, we're the lead. But I think if there was a river walk, the DDA would not be the lead necessarily in that. I don't think that that's anybody at the board's thought process, but they are interested in it. As you've seen, it's in the strategic plan. And so there are board members that are on a committee that have started working on this. So they're the lead of that action, but I don't think of any Riverwalk future would the DDA choose to be.
Is
the
it a
lead.
DDA committee?
Yes, it's a DDA committee that's working on it.
And is anyone else working on this except for the DDA committee?
Not at this time.
Okay, so it's just a vision that you are all starting to begin to generate, and you would need to get the town board on, because they would build it, right? Like, or are you saying if you get a project, the DDA would build it, or you don't know?
We don't know.
Okay.
So it's listed in the plan as something that the DDA could fund potentially, but again, since this isn't all hashed out, there isn't a clear lead in that. But I would say with this item and that work that yes, there's a DDA committee that is leading, kind of doing some due diligence on that.
Okay, cool. Then evaluating the impacts of code changes from housing study on the central business district.
I think we can move on from this one. I brought this up. I think we've this is
It's not.
yeah.
Okay. Change code to prevent empty buildings from sitting. Is that getting at what we were kind of discussing before? Like enforcement code?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, Tanya,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Tanya.
It's certainly not, the DDA can't do that, right?
Mhm.
That's got to go through like a million other committees to change actual codes to do that. But it would benefit the DDA if that were to happen within the town.
So maybe it could be an advocate role.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, it's not even in our power to say,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Although like incentives, we could, offer
There
incentives.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that 25% grant situation you were talking about. That seems like a great way for the NDDA to participate.
I'd like to come back to that after we're finished with this list and ask a question about that program.
Sure.
Okay.
Create a sanitation district so downtown businesses have a central place to put trash and recycling.
Is Ron still on? No, I can't see the screen, so.
I'm on, yeah.
Do you want to
I just-
speak about the sanitation district, Ron? Whether you think you'd be go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've discussed it with several of the merchants. Everybody's interested, and I think this is something the DDA would have to take the lead on, and fund it, and then actually get it into a posture where it's self-funding and create a sanitation district that it centralizes and helps clean up First Street, because everybody acknowledges that we have a trash problem on First Street. Nobody's quite sure what to do. And really, my view is, for the thing to be fair, it would have to be done with a mill levy, so that everybody would be participating on a balanced basis. And I want to work on that.
Ron, this is Tanya. I feel like this has a big partnership possibility with the sustainability committees and their zero waste group. And, you know, they've talked a lot about getting grants for this sort of thing. So, and I don't disagree with you. We have a huge trash problem that we've discussed. We talked about it in the last meeting, right? And anyway, I'm all for this, but I don't know where we would be in this as far as like our role, but.
Well, I think we'd have to be the initial leadership, and then get the merchants themselves to form their own board of directors to make sure that it works continuously, and make the changes and the modifications necessary to meet their needs. But none of them have the time nor the funds to start it. So this is where I heard the term catalyst being used. This is where I think the DDA could be the catalyst with the leadership, the organization, and the funds, and then with the idea that they end up taking it over and running themselves with a source of funds, which would be a mill levy, to make it work. So many are interested. They just don't know how to do it, and they need the help. So I think that's something that's really worth considering by the DDA. We haven't talked about it much because it's low on the priority level, but it's something I think that is a definite need. Tanya, maybe Tanya and I could work on it, because the two of us really see the benefit that we could get from doing something like this.
All right, and then the last one is provide loans in addition to grants as a way to grow revenue for the DDA. This came up as we were talking to people before the meeting, and so I did send out a question to other DDAs, and I think that there have been some loans specifically during the pandemic for people who needed them, but I don't think that it's a regular practice. Many communities, not through the DDA, but the actual community might have a revolving loan fund. And those revolving loan funds are actually kind of a moneymaker, but I do think they're pretty labor intensive. So usually they'll go through like a county economic development group. But in terms of providing loans in addition to grants as a way to grow revenue for the DDA, is that something like a lead? Would you envision that as something that the DDA would lead?
Yeah, I think we would have to. This is Ron. I think we would take a lead on that and advertise it and see if people would be interested in it. A lot of these things are, if we do them, really need communication with the membership that they're available. So we could put a projection for our budget and try it. I'm all for projects that return revenue to the DDA. And I've said that before.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for running through these. We want to make sure that we understand what you're working on going forward and kind of how you envision your role. And so this is really helpful for us, to sort of see how we can support what you're trying to accomplish with recommendations. I don't know why it won't go. All right, so we wanted to do another exercise, and this one, what we're thinking is that the people who are online will call you, because we were going to break into 3 groups, and then maybe we call you in from the groups. But we wanted to talk a little bit about partnerships, right? Because as you're thinking about how you leverage the work that you do and how you get more done, it does come down to partnerships and how you work with other entities. And so what we'd like to do is break into 3 groups, and in each group, we'll have folks consider the partners and processes necessary to accomplish the DDA's vision. What are your partners' priorities? And to outline the roles, people, timing, and processes that would shape a successful outcome. So it'll be a little bit of discussion. And so what we'll need to do is call the folks who are on.
Do you want
line.
each person in the room to call someone online? So like Andrew calls someone, Scott calls someone, Steve calls someone?
That would work. Would that work?
Groups of 3?
Well, if you all call one person, then we'll have groups of 2, and then the rest of us can divide up and join your groups. So one group will be talking about the town as a partner. One group will be talking about private developers as a partner. And one group will be talking about local businesses as a partner.
Could I ask that follow-up question?
Oh,
Because I think it's,
sorry.
I think
yes,
it's
yes,
relevant to this.
Please do.
Okay. So one of those, that very last item on that last slide was about issuing loans. And I'm wondering how similar that is to the funding that you guys did in Longmont, where you call them catalyst projects, right? Where you provide funding to private businesses to do certain things. Were those loans or were those grants that they had to pay you back? I mean, sorry, grants or loans had to pay back?
They were grants.
Okay.
Now, when it got to one of those kind of TIF investment projects where, you know, it was $1 million investment for the facade of Roosevelt Park Apartments, that was the one that came with the lien, right? And so it had to generate over $1 million of TIF in a certain amount of time. Or we could do clawbacks like every few years where they would pay us back.
Okay, so you were getting the money back then through TIFs. It wasn't just, we're going to give you money to do something that would be good for the community, right?
Right. Well, right. We made sure that the project was good for the community, but and that's why you put the lien, right? Because we don't want to give someone $1 million and then 3 years later, they let their insurance lapse and the building burns down and now we're generating nothing, right?
So it's sort of similar to item 10 on our list, but not entirely the same. And I'm just wondering, in something like that last strategy of providing loans, we have the burden of trying to figure out if in providing a loan, if that business is creditworthy, or if how much financial risk is there. And the flip side of that is, if the business if they're creditworthy, why wouldn't they just get a loan through the SBA or through a bank?
So, yeah. So just to be clear, you know, I think our board has a policy where we invest in properties, not businesses, right? So the
Okay,
things that are in our grants are things that help the businesses, and there has to be a real business that's going to avail of that because they're building out the space. But we make sure that it's permanent improvements because we do everything we can to make sure businesses are successful. But these are the hardest jobs in the world, right? These small business storefronts. And so knowing that they all may not be there, we want to make sure the investments that we made stay with the building. And since we started the retail conversion, I'll be honest, the folks that availed of that grant Most of them, the vast majority of them are still in business. If they're not, when they leave, those spaces fill within a month or two because they're ready, they were done right. And so, yeah, so we really try to make sure that investment is in the property that then supports the business that is occupying it. I think loans are hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think loans are hard. The DDA had one loan program that I know. They got a tranche of funds from CDBG money, and it was for some improvements of streetscape and facade for a certain amount of businesses, but it was, yeah, hard.
So I monitored
I have
that
a
project.
quick question
And
if I
It
may.
is, it's a lot of work to run those loan programs and to do revolving loan funds. They're not impossible. It is absolutely something we could do, but it needs to be understood, like it is a lot of work and a lot of maintenance and a lot of looking at documents every year and all of that. Even if you don't have federal fund source, it's still just appropriate due diligence since these are public funds.
I wanted to ask a question if I could about the facade and the $1 million you spent on that. Was the TIF just for that property that paid back the $1 million or that created the million? Was it the increase in the TIF on that one building only or the whole district? This is Ron asking the question.
It was that building only. It was the percentage of tax increment we were getting from that property only.
And did you get it all back?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. Hello?
All
Oh,
right.
no.
We can still hear you, Ron.
Oh, okay. I was trying to mute myself and I guess I didn't. I'll try again.
All right. So yeah, we'll break into these groups, and since we have 3 board members here, if you can each call, we have Tanya, Catherine, and Ron. Should we do?
And what's our subject?
Well, let's see. Do you want to call Ron and talk
You
about
said
town?
I should.
Okay. And Steve, do you want to call Tanya and talk about business?
Do you have a comment?
Yep.
Yeah, I have it.
And
Do you want me to send it, Kate?
and Scott, you'll call Catherine and talk about private development. Does that work?
Can do.
Okay. And
I
then
still didn't get my assignment. This is Ron. Who am I talking to?
you're going to talk
Ron,
about town.
I'm gonna call you and we're gonna talk about town.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. And then we have flip charts that has where we're going to put the partner approach. So you can, as you're talking it through, you can write out your responses and then you'll share back. Okay. And we will take 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah. And
I would recommend using your mic so that you don't get all of them.
right. And then if you
I know, it's just.
hilarious. That is indeed. All right, everyone. Great. Thank you for taking part in the groups. I know it's a little hard to do a hybrid meeting, so hopefully that call in worked. Okay, good. We're rolling with the punches over here. So now we're going to hear back from each of the groups. And we'll be capturing these ideas for things to work with each partner group to really leverage their priorities and the DDA priorities and make some successful outcomes. Who would like to go first with reporting back? All right. Steve's going to go with the business side.
Yep. So Tanya and I had small business owners. So in that realm of like how to partner with small business owners, our first one, we just stole it right from the conversations that have been happening tonight around like that idea of a property improvement grant or a project improvement grant. So that was the first one. That seems like an area where there could be some great partnership. And then based on some other properties in town, the second thing that we thought could be a good opportunity for partnership was really around like property cleanup or remediation grants. There's a couple of properties in town that maybe are going to sit vacant or have challenges evolving into something else without some kind of cleanup or remediation type of grant that would be available. And then the third area, we kind of just talked about some staffing stuff. A lot of the small businesses have some challenges in Nederland with staffing. So just looking at ways if the DDA can help with transportation solutions, whether that's public transit, and really anything around transportation to help small businesses get staffing into town. Along with the other side of that would just be affordable housing and trying to work on affordable housing that could help businesses to be able to have staff that's actually in town. So that was kind of two things around staffing. And then the final one was just around maybe working with some of the small businesses that are maybe more challenged around like marketing and business development to be able to have some DDA driven resources for those businesses to be able to promote their business and just have some assistance. And I'll throw it out to Tanya if I missed anything, if you want to jump in.
No, I think you did a great job summarizing that, Steve. So thank you. I think right there would be a lot to accomplish if we could accomplish those goals. So thanks for that.
Great. Thank you, guys. And I think that was really good. And some of what we were talking about when I was talking through that with Steve was some of the cool things that we've seen in other places. And a lot of times you'll hear, I always think of that one campaign you did in Longmont, Kimberly, where it was like, get to know your downtown businesses. And so they sort of had different opportunities for each entrepreneur to be highlighted in the newspaper, as well as on your website. You have a complete directory of all of the businesses.
Yeah, for our marketing support, like I said, we don't invest in businesses, but we do support. So we have a directory with a business snapshot. So if a smaller business doesn't really maintain its own website, they at least can be found on the web. And then it has an interactive map and it says best places to park. And, so it kind of curates that thing. Right now, we are doing a everybody's neighborhood. Downtown is everybody's neighborhood, kind of an invitation to the whole community to come and make downtown a part of its neighborhood. And we worked with the St. Vrain Valley Innovation Center, and they made 70 videos. And these kids, we've paid a lot of money for professionals to do videos that don't hold a candle to this class. And that does go in and it features the businesses, and it's really reiterating you need to come out and support these folks. They're your neighbors, your friends. They're making an impact. So we always try to personify what's happening with the people that are down there.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. On our end, the NDDA maybe needs to use some of its own money to improve our website so that it could include all our businesses and be more up to date. So that could maybe be a goal of ours as well.
And
We do have that. So we, in July, you approved me entering into an agreement, and I'm just waiting for approval on that agreement. And then we will have somebody that'll be helping us update it. But the business directory piece is another piece that, there's been a lot of discussion on, and I love the Longmont idea too about it, because it is something that people in our community have been asking for. So if the DDA wanted to expand on that business directory, that would be definitely something we've gotten feedback about. It's just been hard on top of updating the website with the directory. It's just become unwieldy because we're getting a lot of spam and that from people submitting. And so we're trying to figure out what the best way to really do it is.
If I could just tell you, so our web provider, it's called Geocentric, and all of our backend data is the same. So we only have one thing to update. We don't have to update a website and our own internal ones. So, it's just in there by design.
They also have the ability to post vacancies, spaces that people are looking to lease. And I think another thing to think about is like shared services, right? So for small businesses, if there are ways to think about some of those solutions or the different needs that they have and creating a place where people can say, hey, you know what I need? Or, hey, you know what I have to share? Or, you know what I have too much of? Like, is my space too big for me? And I'm not going to be able to survive as a business. Like, can you bring in another business to complement them? There's a lot more of that happening since the pandemic. And so if you can facilitate some of that as the DDA, it can really help them and also give you access to kind of market and communicate the things that are going on in the downtown as a whole. So it puts you in a good position to really report on and communicate out about what people need and what people doing and how cool they are. Great. Well, let's give a big round of applause to the business team. Okay. Who would like to go next?
Do the
town
town
You do
team.
the town.
Sure.
All right. And Ron with the town.
So as far as some of the what we consider towns what we consider towns priorities, number one would be money. And that's kind of like far high and above everything else, because with budgets the way they are and ever expanding needs, money is super important. Also just keeping in mind and recognizing that what town is dealing with is town-wide, not just within the boundaries of the central business district. So kind of honoring that, that's what they've got on their plate. And we think that, one of the things we came up with three, but the third being that a big priority of town is to improve their organizational performance. So those were some of the three key priorities of town that we saw. And regarding kind of the roles, people, timing, and processes, what we think is the kind of paramount thing is consistency, and that that being there's a few examples like following through with decisions, throughout if there happens to be changing of guard, either within town staff or BOT, that we as a DDA kind of function on generally a longer timeline, or, maybe it seems that way. And we can't, we want to figure, we can't chart a new course, based on turnover in town. So, following through with like number 3, improved organizational performance, any way that we can, help advocate or suggest. Ron?
I'm on the phone.
Yeah. Okay. Any way that we can help advocate or suggest for improved processes, which was a big topic last night, which we don't need to get into, but be it any, whether it's the Baldridge method or Gino Wickman traction, there's all sorts of different methodologies for improved processes for active feedback and documented by predetermined milestones. So, we want to recognize and honor and help advocate for town to get the resources they need to improve their processes and kind of have a more consistent hand in interactions with the DDA. Ron, do you have anything to add?
Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
No, I have nothing to add. Very well. Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for the town report. Kimberly, can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that the DDA and Longmont work together? I know you have some established partnerships and meeting times.
Yeah, so when I first came in, my directive from my board was you need to help relationships with the city and the DDA. And so I brought a model from my old community where we do downtown collaboration meetings, and we have a person from each of the relevant departments, people in public works, people in parks, maintenance, people in recreation, and we all come and really focus on what's happening downtown. It really helped. It was interesting. It helps us be able to troubleshoot or let them know what we're seeing as eyes and ears on the street. But I was also often shocked by the information they didn't have from each other of knowing like what was going to be happening. So it helped, avert some disasters of things happening at the same time or whatever. So by doing that, I established relationships with a lot of staff as a staff member where I could call and get the information we needed. Really was able to stress the importance of communicating with the property owners, and we really took the lead on all of those communications. We do have a board member, obviously, on our board. We do reports that are in our board packet each month that kind of outline all of the initiatives that we're working on and moving forward and where we are on them. And so it's really taken a lot of relationship building. And just today I called the public works director and I said, there's things that we absolutely have to have on the CIP. And I know you keep telling me that we don't have funding for that right now, but we're never going to have funding if we don't get it in the queue. And these are kind of things that we need. And so really working together before the budget process starts to say, what are the joint initiatives we can do? What's the role the DDA can play? And even if we don't know that yet, but we all know we need sidewalks on 2nd Avenue, we need to put that in a 5-year CIP unfunded. And sometimes we will, to get things done faster, like we talk about, we'll commission the construction plans, right? We can't build it. We certainly can't build it without the city, but it shows them that we're serious about having this done. And then it gets it that much closer in the queue of the CIP. Now, we'll never go out and write a plan unless they say, yeah, and we work on it jointly because we don't want to waste resources by writing a plan that they'll just throw away. But we kind of build those kind of relationships to move things forward.
Great. Thank
I
you
have
to
a-
the town. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ron.
I have a question to answer here in terms of the partnerships. Have you run into ever a situation where a conflict of interest conflicted with the partnership?
Yes. Yes, we have. We have to do a lot of board training to remind folks what conflict of interests are, and we certainly call each other on what they are. We do different board training, and like I said, when that first Catalyst project that we talked about, there was a board member that was an investor, but they didn't work on either side of the deal with the DDA. So we worked with other partners about on the development. And then when it came to the DDA board to vote, that person not only recused themselves, but left the room while the conversation was happening. So we have checks and balances in place for those conflicts of interest.
Any other questions on town partnerships? Applaud everyone. Okay, now, last but not least, we have our private developers.
Okay. So Catherine and I had a conversation about this, and Kimberly was there with us chiming in as well. When it comes to partnerships or collaborating with private developers, we're not a big town with the kind of funds that even a town like Longmont has. So somebody comes forward with a $10 million, $15 million project, that's what we can do is pretty small compared to what they're looking for. And so things have to scale down in a small town, right? And one of the ways that was brought up is we don't always have to do an initial cash loan or grant or investment with a developer. We could also work out some kind of an arrangement where they get reimbursed over a period of time if they meet certain requests that the DDA would have as a partner. The way that would have to work, I think, is the objectives that the DDA would have to lay out would have to be, they'd have to be in agreement with or correspond to our comp plan. So we have to get a clear vision of what those objectives are. We talked about a few of those tonight, and it doesn't mean these are the things that we're planning to do in 2024, the projects. It means what is our vision for what we're trying to accomplish, whether it's through town or developer or anyway, right? And so using the comp plan as a guiding document, and that's going to get more work in the coming year, I think. We need to find commonalities between what the developer's goal, what their concept is, and what the DDA's objectives or vision is in keeping with the comp plan. Example would be, maybe development on a small scale in a small town. Just one example. And then the other thing is that the developer needs to, a phrase was brought to us called fill a gap, right? The developer would need to fill some kind of a gap between what it is that we have now and what the residents of the town or what the community wants that we don't have now. And it's easy to find out what the residents want. Part of it, you can find some of that in the comp plan, but you can find a lot of it just talking with residents too. And, what people talk about here all the time is we need more restaurants. We need more live music. Some people say we need more retail that lines up with the outdoor industry or whatever it may be, right? But you find those gaps, and it's much easier to help incent a developer if they're filling that gap. So those are the important points that we stumbled upon.
Great, that was wonderful. Do you want to share? I guess we've already kind of heard from Kimberly on ways that they work with private private developers. But some of what I'm hearing is, you know, we've often seen communities, so say you want more restaurants. If you look at the numbers, usually putting in a new commercial kitchen, people go broke. The first people who put it in go broke, the second people who put it in go broke, but the third people to use a commercial kitchen seem to do okay. But sometimes you can use TIF to put in those types of improvements into existing buildings. And once again, you put an easement on it or a lien so that they cannot, you know, take apart or sell the different pieces. They have to remain with the building regardless of their business surviving. But there are ways to really say, okay, we want more food, we want more music, we want more retail, and think about what that is. We're also seeing more efforts around how do you incubate the types of businesses that people are looking for and trying to get those types of investment. So we're seeing more communities that might create like a food truck that you can rent or a little food cart. So, you know, there might be people who want to try out a business idea and you have to see how it would work first. And so there's been a lot of efforts around that, especially in smaller communities where you might not have a whole lot of potential. They're doing more like the food truck or the food carts that you could have be local. Do you have other ideas on that, Kimberly? Sort of some fun things that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think along the incubation, you know, we partner a lot with the Small Business Development Center. We partner for other things like that to make sure that businesses have the mentorship or the resources that they need. You know, we also wanted to support food trucks in some way. However, it's really hard when businesses are paying high property taxes for their brick and mortar. So we don't bring we don't bring those in, but we did have a co-working space that wanted to have a commercial kitchen that was for rent for either those food truck businesses or restaurants that wanted to create a new menu, but you can't really ever do it when you're cooking at your own place and things like that. So that was an instance where we did invest in a kitchen for a non-restaurant building because it would have the impact of so many businesses that could get established. So we do kind of look at different opportunities like that. But again, staying with our kind of mission and creed that we're going to invest in the properties and support the businesses. So.
Great. And then I think, yeah, working, you know, seeing how the community outreach goes with the comprehensive plan process. You know, a lot of the stuff that we heard from you all in your surveys was that there were challenges because of lack of community input or outreach or awareness. And so just keeping in mind that that comprehensive planning process is going to be a great effort in outreach and connection with people. And so I think you are on target in talking about using that process. But really, if the DDA can think about, you know, what are some of the questions that you would like to have in that community outreach, right? Like, what are the goals that you're trying to work on, and making sure that you're working with the team that's doing the outreach to kind of help shape some of those questions would be really smart to do now.
Can I say one thing? If you do your summer concert series, what a fantastic opportunity for you to engage with the community on a regular basis. So make sure when you do that, you bake in a booth that you all do or some fun games. You know, one time we did a big, you know, this name tags like, hello, my name is. We'd made name tags that says, I want blank in my downtown. And people could just come write about the things that they wanted. And so think about fun ways that you can do that. You know, and I think the more that you can engage the community and have a constant conversation, it's super helpful.
And you could put some of that into your request for proposals for somebody to do it for you, right? Like build that in so that you have them helping you do it. All right. Any questions, comments on private developers? All right. Great. Well, thank you all for participating. I'm really glad that we were able to do a call-in function and that worked. All right, so our last part, and we are just about out of time, but we wanted to talk about how decisions are made, and there was some conversation about criteria and measurement. There were also comments in your surveys about how the board receives information, the board packet, you know, what gets on the agenda. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how items get on the agenda and how do you know if are they ready for discussion or decision making if they get on the agenda? What is the process there? Maybe Kate, do you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
People submit requests is basically they'll submit it to me and the chair is typically how, and then the chair signs off on if that goes or not. But it's not a one person. I mean, the chair has the ultimate say, but I can say, you know, well, this is timely because of X, Y, and Z sometime in that, but it's ultimately up to the chair what goes before the board.
And how do you all feel that works? Is there more? I hear that you are very busy and that there's a lot of information coming. Is it too much? You know, are you receiving? How do you feel about the number of things getting on the agenda and the process of receiving that information? How is it working? Because it seemed like in the survey that was something that kind of came up.
Seems like sometimes it's either feast or famine. We've got a lot of ideas at once, or we won't have any for a while. And we try to consider everything that comes before us. And we've had a lot of robust discussion about the way we're handling our funds and the way we should handle our funds in terms of projects that have come before. So it's a work in progress, and because we have new blood on the board with new ideas, and I think that's going to help us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the process has the potential to work. I think sometimes it's having the information and everybody having time to look through everything so that we can have some like concise conversations, like concise, well-informed conversations. So I don't know that when I think about like trying to break down challenges that we have to good decision making, I don't know that our process of getting things on the agenda is one of the big challenges, in my opinion.
I think
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think I'm gonna break apart what I heard Steve say, which is actually just getting something on the agenda is relatively, you know, not complicated. However, it's, you know, what happens once it's on the agenda in the discussion. And what we've been working on is this, you know, talking about a criteria for evaluation, which is still, you know, just in its infancy, although Scott's put some more time into you know, paring down some things that were brought up at the last meeting. So I think certainly, you know, we want to have like an evaluation process that makes sense, that's not overly cumbersome, and both for proposals and then to track proposals after they're agreed upon. But I don't think necessarily now is the time to kind of dive deep into our process for that. Just personally, like I think we have a lot more. I think the board needs to see what has just been being worked on like over the last week, 2 weeks, month, and understand it and agree upon it. So that's my 2 cents.
Wait, can I just add an observation just as staff? I think one of the concerns that I have is it just sometimes it feels like half-baked ideas are ending up on the agendas. And like, take a look at a board of trustee packet, you know, those aims are in depth, have tons of information. And there's a lot of work that's gone into it before it even ends up before the board of trustees. And so I think one of my hopes is that maybe there's more thoughtful consideration that if it's just a concept and it hasn't yet to be explored, that there's more due diligence done to truly explore that idea before it comes to the board. Because it feels like a lot of time wasted and a lot of things that are actions that then no vote happens. And so now you've just got kind of a whole procedural mess because it's an action item that no action is ready to be taken. And so my hope for y'all is perhaps more work sessions or things where you can talk about the concepts freely, but don't bring it to that level. Because I think the last couple of meetings, you've had a ton of action items that you didn't even, you want to vote on, but yet they ended up on the action. How? Like in my opinion, they should have never got there because they weren't ready. There hadn't been enough research and follow through kind of on the back end. You know, for us, it's staff and we've got way more than just Kate, but there should have been, in my opinion, more research done before it ever even came forward.
The evaluation, at one point in time, we called it a flow chart, then we called it a matrix, then we called it a discussion guide. I don't really care what we call it, but you know, the whole point of that was not to create a hurdle so that we can't get anything done because we're so busy answering questions. The whole point was to provide a guide for that diligence. And ideally, what I would like is if somebody's going to bring something to the board and put it on the agenda, especially if it's something we're supposed to vote on. But prior to that, the questions of here's an idea and I think it's cool. So I'm going to be very, very frank about this. We have a lot of things that we discuss that people bring before us because they think it's a cool idea. And that's how things start. You don't do something unless it's cool. So I have no problem with that, right? We have to have cool stuff. But I would love for somebody to come forward and say, this is the point of this. This is what it is. This is how big we think it should be. We think it should generate revenue, or we think it shouldn't generate revenue. It should just be free, and we're doing it as an amenity for the community. If it generates revenue, here's who gets the revenue. Here's who manages it. Here's who pays for it. Here's who owns it after it's done. Here's who runs it. All of these questions, those are parts of the concept that should come with the idea of this would be cool. So my question is, if someone brings an idea to the board, would that be the type of diligence that would correspond to what you're talking about right now, Miranda?
Yeah, I mean, for us, obviously, the way it works for the staff is I won't even put it on the forecaster, which it gets ultimately approved by the mayor if I don't think it's ready to go. Like, there's just no way. I mean, it's a responsibility of us to make sure that we can outline all of those different components, you know, and we have an AIM template that says, what is the agenda? What's the summary? What's the history of this? What's the financial implications of this? How does it tie to your strategic plan? Like, you may not always see that in all the aims, but that's how a blank aim starts. And you really should have thought through all those components before it comes forward. And then also have very clear and concise questions. What are we trying to get out of this conversation? And if we can't even develop that yet, it's not ready and I move it.
Right. And because this is the DDA, I want one of the standards to be, if you have an idea, a cool idea that you want to do, or you want to build, or you want to turn into a process or a service in this town, how does it benefit business in this town? Because that has to be part of what we're talking about, right?
And that's really what ProSAP does. ProSAP has a very in-depth agenda item form, and I think I've sent it around to everyone, to maybe just Ron and Andrew, but really it's like, how does this tie to ProSAP? I mean, Kat as the chair really makes the team think through, have you evaluated this? And even it goes down into who have you talked to? Who have you talked to from town staff about this? Who have you talked to from the community about this? Have you started to do some of that vetting? And that's a kind of a way that they start to control their agendas as well, is making sure that it's, because for a while there was just kind of like every idea under the sun, and she makes sure that it's really ingrained in something and that the research has been done.
And I think Kate had a comment and Kimberly had a question.
Yeah, so what I'll say is, so we use the AIM template that town has, but most of what I'm getting back is just a summary, or people will just send me an email with a paragraph or just 3 sentences. And so then it's on to me to try to find some background for you, and it's not always there. And so that would be a big thing. And I do love ProStabs. I think I did send it out to everybody in the DDA as well, what tool that Cat Bar uses to make sure that you're not spinning your wheels. And I love Miranda's suggestion about using work sessions to talk about things that you're passionate about, and then help that get to a discussion item and to an action item. But, not be spending that time when, like Miranda says, we're bringing it as an action item and there's not going to be any action on it.
I'm just curious, like who is bringing things? Are these other board members? Or are these like
Anybody that wants to talk to us. And so I do think it is nice that I hope we have the reputation that you can come talk to us, that we're not obstructionists in the way of coming to talk to us about things. But like Miranda said, things aren't baked enough a lot of times. But most of the time, who we are working with is town, and town is coming to us with a grant opportunity or something. And so it's already gone through several boards. So it's coming more baked than other things. But sometimes it's board members, sometimes it's board members through conversations with community members. So it's kind of being brought on their behalf. And so it's just kind of can be anything really.
so just I don't know if this would be helpful or not, but on my board agenda that it's always, executive director's report, and I give reports, and then I'll often say, hey, this is something that's happening. Do you want more information? You know what I mean? So instead of just at first request, people are on the agenda, right? I kind of talk and I figure out what they want and then see if we want to lead it. So I don't know if there can be some of that, like, so, but it doesn't, you're not saying no and you're saying, yeah, let me ask a few questions, and then you can come back and say, this is what we need to kind of save some of that time. Because yeah, I think conversations can go nuts when there's no real information, right? So that's just a suggestion to help.
And I do just want to aim back to the beginning, where it was talking about what you really wanted, and it was about more action, like clear plans and guidance. And so part of that might be making sure that things are developed to a certain level before you start considering them as a board. So great. Well, that was helpful. Are there other questions or comments on that topic? Because, tonight we just really want to kind of hear what's happening so that we can start this process. And we do have, we have looked at some of the stuff that Scott and Andrew have been working on. And so we'll look forward to seeing updates on that as well. We also have the form that Miranda mentioned. And so, yeah, we will. And we also have other examples of ways that other communities do things. So we can kind of look at all the different things and give you a variety of options in our recommendations. All right, so we wanted to go ahead and talk about next steps, and we have our word clouds of all of your priorities as well. So under beautification, the bigger words mean that they've shown up more times. And so clean, art, sanitation, and cohesive are your keywords on this one. Business services, support, and banking. Circulation, traffic management, parking, walkability. And event and programming, music, art, and community. I love that one. Thank you, Kylie, for putting those together. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about next steps. So first, what were your big takeaways from tonight, and what would you like to talk more about over the next few visits? Maybe we can go, have each person share. Oh.
I don't know, Catherine, if you wanted to type yours into the chat.
Did you all have any takeaways that you felt were important from tonight? Because we are striving both to share some different ideas and kind of educate about other places and ways that things are happening.
Well, I'll start. I appreciated the education piece and thinking about things a little bit differently. Hearing Longmont's experience as well as your own is just helpful. So that's been lovely on this snowy night.
Great.
The examples from Longmont, super, super helpful. We appreciate you guys making the drive up especially in this kind of weather. And it kind of cracks the nut a little bit for us to think about things a little differently than just the way that we always look at them. And that's helpful. Thanks.
Is there anything that you'd like to dive deeper into that we touched on tonight?
It might be useful
Yes.
in the future for us to take some of the ideas that we've got in front of us that are on our agenda for the next 12 to 18 months or even longer, when we look at how long some of these projects will take, and kind of set them side by side with some of the ideas that have been generated tonight and see where we can, find a few items that might line up, process-wise especially.
Awesome. And Ron, I think you were chiming in there.
Yes, I was really impressed with the discussion on the partnerships. And right after I asked my question, my phone dropped out and I couldn't get back on for 15 minutes. So I didn't hear the answer. So I'm going to go back and review the whole tape so I can hear the meeting from start to finish, because I really only made about 2/3 of it here. But anyway, I was very pleased with that concept and I hope we can introduce it and use it. So that's my big takeaway.
Great. Is there anything that you'd like us to dive deeper into that we touched on tonight? We're going to go with no. All right.
I heard, for example, a couple of, really great ideas, just small things. For instance, the name tags at an event, having a booth, or incubators, and, be it for local artists, etc. So given that, like, this is the, facilitated meeting of the DDA, right? Kind of your deliverables. And the next one is a summary of this discussion and proposals. I'd really love to see, some ways where you think there's gaps, you're seeing the gaps where you could make suggestions of, how to help synergize with what you're seeing. And it's unfortunate that half of the meeting attendants and board members weren't able to be here tonight. But so in any case, that's, I think, I'm really looking forward to what, DCI sees as some of the proposals and advice, et cetera, that after hearing what we've been through tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think kind of back to Scott's point, it's good to see some different perspectives. I also think it's we had a strategic session earlier this summer. This one, some different themes come up, and I think one of the challenges that I think we run into is like it's maybe easier to do this than it is to take this and have it translate into how we function as a board. So I'd like to try to figure out how we can take some of the information that we've pulled together from different sessions like this, but actually try to get some traction and get it so that we're moving in the direction of the things that we have in the budget, and or how we can still figure out where there's gaps and how we can function in a way to do some of the things that they come up as great ideas, but then they just end up on a piece of paper and nothing happens with them. So I think that's where things can feel like where we need to, I don't know if I guess on a snowy night, the term traction is a great term to use, right? Like we need to be able to get some traction and get moving. I think that's my takeaway.
Can I just say, I think that's so great. And sometimes I have to tell people, we're not devoid of good ideas. We just don't have the capacity to do them all. And sometimes I think we get crippled by the fact that we want to start at the finish, right? And so really kind of saying in this year, these are our priorities. And unless it's the perfect idea at the perfect time that can't be done any other time than that, or, so I think kind of saying these are the things that we're going to do, and we're going to just parking lot. We were going to have a parking lot here, ideas that we can maybe do later, and just push through and get some wins under your belt. And then I think it will help. So, I think we always have to kind of tell ourselves to, yeah, we can't do that. Or I'll be like, yes, and my board will go, no, because we don't have the capacity, and you need that check and balances. So I totally hear what you're saying.
Miranda?
Well, I was gonna do Catherine's really quick.
Oh, yeah.
So Catherine said this has helped to clarify and add in some new ideas of how things have been implemented in Longmont. For me, I guess I do. I also appreciate the partnership conversations. I think that we really, even just as a town, I'd love to do the same thing with the Board of Trustees, because I think we don't spend a lot of time evaluating those partnerships. And I think those of you who have worked with me recently, I'm really passionate about the economic development component and how can town and the DDA serve as better partners to our businesses, to developers, and work collaboratively with you. So I think your session in February, when you bring everyone together, I think they're also energized in the same way. And so I'd love to see that as a commonality between the Board of Trustees and the DDA, is really just that economic development focus. Working with SE Group on our downtown sub-area plan. I mean, there's a lot going on, but it's still fragmented in many ways. It's like town's doing its own thing and the NDDA is doing its own thing. No reason for that. And so I feel like this is just a great segue into what is to come.
Yay. Well, I feel like that's a positive note to end on. I want to thank you all for being here, for calling in, for participating. I know it was a little, we kind of had to change it all up, and we have gone we started a little late and we're ending a little late, but I really appreciate your participation and really getting into these ideas. I think it's really helpful for us just to kind of hear all of the different pieces that have been going on, kind of what you're working on, where you would like to see things going. And we will strive. This is one of the things I think that our organization does best is give you plans that will meet you where you are, right? So not something that will sit on a shelf, but things that will help you leverage the assets that you have at your disposal and the capacity that you are at right now so that you can start doing things. We're ambitious and yet realistic, right? So I will say there are a lot of downtown groups that when you ask them, they're like, we don't actually do anything. All we do is outline the goals, and then we put out a request for interest, and we find somebody in our community who wants to do it. So you can like support those local businesses, support those organizations. They can do all of the work. They can plan all of the things, right? But it all stems from you having clear goals and understand how you're going to work with them. And you leverage everything that you have and get their input. And it helps to build that sense of community, sense of place, and sense of awareness for all the things that you're trying to do. So we will strive to do that for you. We don't have our dates yet for the next meeting, but we do have a ton of educational things. So if there are other things that you would like to tune in for, we have a whole slew of different meetings going on. And I was mentioning to Miranda that we have a program right now that is working on identifying and bringing resources to support brownfield. So what you're talking about with the underground storage tanks or the properties that are impacted by a gas station, like all of these would be qualifying for that. So we'll send over some additional things to consider that we'll work through the town on. But I think this is going to be great, and I'm gonna very much enjoy working with you over the next few months. So thank you. And thank you, Kimberly, for all of your input, and Kylie behind the scenes doing all the work.
Richard, thank you.
All right.
Yes, thank you. And the canyon's back open.
Oh, the canyon's open.
Yeah. We just have to kill the time.
And thank you to Kate and Miranda for getting us all of the support documentation and planning.
All right. Thanks, Catherine and Ron.
Thank you online.
Thank you. We
Okay.
appreciate your coming.
Oh, yeah.
Good night, all.